All right. Good morning, all, and welcome to this morning session about understanding maturity of data spaces. And is technology working? Yeah. All right. So this is the Tuesday morning of the Data Week 2022, and my name is Tuomo Tuikka, and I'm working at VTT Technical Research Center of Finland as the lead of data space solutions. I'm also in the BDVA board and co-leading the task force on data spaces with my colleague Edward Curry, who is also here speaking and discussing with us. In this session, I have a moderator role, introducing the colleagues in the session and keeping time. And if you will have any questions to the speakers, I also follow the questions in the B2Match platform and convey the questions to the team here. We have a great group of experts this morning, and let me start from the picture here. There's just a second if I can find it. I can find all these windows here. So let's start from the Professor Edward Curry, who is, as said, has been leading in specific topic at BDVA's task force on data spaces with me, but he's also a director of the Inside SFI Center. Then on the upper row of the slide, we find Tille, who is senior research scientist at SINTEF, the Norwegian research organization. And on the right-hand side, you can see Juan Carlos Perez Baun, who works as a researcher at Atos Research and Innovation Department. Marko Turpeinen is the founder and CEO of 1001 Lakes, a company specialized in data ecosystems, while at the same time an adjunct professor at Aalto University. Vincent Keunen is the founder and the CEO of Anonymization 7. Vincent has a drive to create health solutions and has developed numerous successful medical IT systems. And then we have Sebastian Ramacher, who works as a scientist at AIT, Austrian Institute of Technology. So we will do so now that there will be short presentations by the group, and then we may raise some questions about them. But there should be enough time for good discussion after the talks. Now I just take some time to give introduction and motivation to the topic of this session. I think we somewhat also assume now that the audience have some kind of understanding on what is meant by European data spaces. And this concept has been there some time, and at least should be known by those who have looked at the European data strategy. So I will not go deeply into the conceptual approaches, as I think the colleagues here in the session have thought of their perspectives and bring that up. Only that with data spaces, the idea is to interconnect European data resources in a trusted and secure manner, which then would lead to new business opportunities and a flourishing digital market in Europe. In the big picture, it is important to see that data spaces bring together relevant data infrastructures, whatever they eventually are, and governance frameworks, including regulative aspects of data spaces. So these will then facilitate data pooling and data sharing. So there is also an effort going on on governance after the European Data Strategy was published. We have seen Data Governance Act, Data Act being proposed, and certainly these are not only effort the only efforts going on. Sort of like this is just a glimpse in list format here that and showcase emphasizing that the development is rather new. Within 2 or 3 years now, Europe is building something really new with regard to data, and at the same time, while this happens, the technical development is going on within organizations which specify and offer frameworks to actually implement these approaches, and surely there are also implementations running at the same time. So there is evidently at least serious design work needed to converge these two lines of development. Now, and what happens? We are seeing a multitude of attempts to create data spaces in various phases of maturity. Some of them being test beds to get the idea how value can be created, and some are already functioning environments, and which could be considered as a running data space. And considering the maturity of data spaces, now it's well, there's a tradition on maturity modeling, and one remarkable difference maybe from maturity modeling point of view from traditionally done, which has been traditionally done in the software systems development, is that like instead of estimating the maturity of a single organization, we should be able to understand and estimate also how mature is the data space ecosystem. So understanding in a way that we know where we are in the design of such data spaces, and we would know what there is to be done and to make the data space more advanced, and so get some kind of reflection in that way. So therefore, the new way to understand data ecosystem, data space, and the position of organization in this ecosystem is needed to model the maturity of data space, and also these would be references to be used in new data space development efforts that would be helping to scale data spaces in Europe. So obviously, the more wider and deeper analysis of data space settings is waiting to be done in the drawing board, so to say. But then again, we can look at what our colleagues are doing and what aspects they take into account to advance data spaces. And in this way, we can probe for what kind of parameters we should be measuring eventually to make these measures comparable. So this is what we are doing now. And I took this image from BDVA publication. It's called Towards European Governed Data Sharing Spaces. And that was about 2 years ago when we tried to estimate the timescale for data space and what actions should be done in order to make them successful. And we thought that in the first phase that some kind of convergence should happen. And here convergence is quite large concept, and meaning maybe that convergence of approaches such as governance and technical into a reasonable and actionable setting. And I think this is something that we see now happening, at least in the experimentation we have in Europe. We of course we could also dive into the concept more and then see the convergence of companies into the governance and technical requirements and so on. So that's much to do in that way. So I think this is a discussion to reflect on what we are doing, and then again more and more experimentation is going on to ignite the data spaces with evolving standardization. More and more deployment starts to happen, and awareness of opportunities grow. So this figure shows that data space exploitation is a long process, maybe 10 years, maybe more. But while doing this, innovations evidently is both technical and organizational. It will be happening and are needed. So about this session, now we bring together experts who work with data platforms and data spaces in various phases to address data space maturity and ways to understand how maturity of data spaces can be understood and modeled. So now we start with the BDVA approach to model data space maturity. And then we discuss on how data platform, data space projects see what is needed to understand the maturity of their solutions in the data ecosystem, and further coming into what are the elements of data space maturity. And therefore, here you can see the agenda and the speakers. And I think with these talks, there's so here you can see the BDVA first, then we go to see health data platform, which is under 7. It's from this SME perspective. Then we look at agricultural data space, maritime data space, and then more about technical solutions on SSI and crypto solutions, and what kind of place that they have in this setting. So we have here bits and pieces to work on, and I think we could be starting now with Professor Edward Curry. So Ed, you are online, I can see, and please you take the podium.
Thank you very much, Tomo. Can you see my slides okay there?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, and thanks for the fantastic introduction. So my name's Ed Curry. I'm a professor of data science at the SFI Center for Data Analytics, and I'm also the vice president of the Big Data Value Association. So today what I want to do was to kind of give a high level kind of setting the scene for maturity within data spaces, and kind of explore what that means in terms of the technical and the organizational perspectives of that. If people aren't familiar with what we mean by maturity, there's been a number of maturity models that have been developed in many different areas. Tomo mentions the CMI, which comes from the software engineering space. Within management for organizations, there's been many maturity models developed as well, and also for different technologies and for different areas. But what actually is a maturity model? Just to kind of give people an idea of what that is. Well, what you're looking at is trying to define different levels of a capability or a technical competency that you have, and then basically identifying how that can improve over a set of levels. Typically, it's 5 levels, and the idea being that the level 1 is your most basic one, and then over time, as you develop your sophistication, or as you create and mature your capability, you actually become more and more sophisticated as you move along, and you can move to level 2, 3, and 4. It's a way of kind of helping you understand where you're at, maybe where your collaborators or your competitors are at in terms of maturity, and understanding, well, what's the road ahead? If I wanted to invest more in this particular area or in this particular technology, what are the things that we need to do, or what are the features that we need to develop to be able to increase the level of maturity that we have? So it's a very broad concept that's been around for a long time, as I say, within various different communities, but it's very relevant to data spaces, because when we look at data spaces, as Tomo said, these are quite complex socio-technical infrastructures that we're actually building. They're not just about the technologies and the platforms, but they're about the organizations and the individuals and the ecosystems and how all of this works together. And this very much kind of opens up the challenges that we have in data spaces, is that we have these very significant technical challenges around developing that technical infrastructure, things like the data services that we want to develop, ensuring that we have interoperability, that we have appropriate semantics, that we have usage control, sovereignty for the individual, that we have appropriately designed brokers. So there's a lot of technical challenges that we need to look at, and there can be maturity of those technical solutions. But at the same time, we also have this organizational challenge as well. How are our organizations set up to be able to work within a data space, to be able to work within the ecosystem? Things like the business strategy, planning, the alignment of the strategy to the operations of the organization, performance monitoring, governance, value capture. These are things that are very important for our organizations to be mature in order to maximize the benefit from data spaces. And that's very much kind of what I want to highlight today, is that when we see the presentations and the examples that we have from the rest of the panel, we're going to see some of these maturity challenges in the areas of the technical infrastructure, but also many of them will exist within the organizational side as well. And we believe in BDVA, you need to look at both of these together. You can't look at them in isolation if you want to actually have value capture coming from your data spaces and your participation. So what I'm going to kick off with is a very quick example of a very simple maturity model from a data space. And this is from a technical perspective. Now, this is my own work, it's not BDVA work, but it's a very, very simple example of how we can try to understand a data space from a technical point of view and how we could potentially model it in terms of its maturity. So I'm taking the classic example, a definition of data spaces here from Halvey, Franklin, and Mayer. It talks about the challenge here is that a data space is not a data integration approach, but rather it's a data coexistence approach. The idea here is that you're not trying to integrate all of your data together, but rather you're trying to make sure that the data is available and that you're providing support then over that data with a number of support services to be able to provide functionality to allow you to be able to search it, to be able to query the data, to be able to work with it. And basically the challenge there is that you need to be able to provide those services over all the data, regardless of the level of actual integration that exists there. The work that we're just presenting here is coming primarily from looking at linked data and data spaces together, and particularly with the use of real-time data. So we developed what we call real-time linked data spaces, which is basically integrating data spaces, linked data knowledge graphs, entity-centric query capabilities over a pay-as-you-go paradigm for how you actually integrate and work with that data. So for us to be able to figure out this pay-as-you-go thing, the pay-as-you-go actually also nicely aligns to the notion of maturity as well. So here's a very technical perspective on the maturity of data sources within our data space and the level of integration of those data sources within our data space. And what we've modeled here is using a very, very kind of simple 5-star method that's based off Tim Berners-Lee approach for 5-star data. The idea that being 1 star is just very, very basic data. 2-star is machine readable data. At level 3, you have basic integration between your data sources. At level 4, you have more advanced integration. And then basically 5 stars, you've got full semantic integration of all of your data sources. You've got search, you've got query, you've got all of that control over them. And the idea here is that you have different levels of maturity in terms of the level of integration of the data sources. What actually gives you the benefit here is that the actual maturity of that integration allows you to have this pay-as-you-go approach where you don't have to fully integrate all your data sources in advance, but rather you can do it in an incremental manner, on a phased manner that actually allows you to control the level of investment that you're doing in data integration so that you can actually ensure that you're only integrating the useful data sources when they're needed to be able to participate in applications. So the more investment that you make, basically the more integrated your data sources become within the data space. So it's this phased approach. In order for us to understand, well, what does that look like then in terms of maturity? Well, we can take this 5-star model that we have that basically can identify the level of maturity that you would have for a data source interacting with a data service. Let's say, for example, search. So at a top level there for a basic search for a basic data source, you might just have basic text search, but at the 5-star level, you might have full semantic search, allowing you to look for related and connected data sources as well. So it allows you to do an awful lot more. In terms then of how that maturity works, well, basically, as you can see on the left here, we have our pay-as-you-go rating from basic maturity right up to full semantic integration. And then for each of the different services that we have in our data space, we can actually model the level of maturity that we might look for there. So the simple example there I gave was for search and query, and you can see that in the middle here. At the very basic level, you might have browsing, followed by keyword search, followed by some kind of basic structured search. Then you might start moving to more things like queries, which basically allow you to be very, very specific about the type of data that you need. And with queries, you need to have that semantic integration. You need to have the schemas aligned, the data sources aligned. But you can see there how you move from a very basic version of just browsing right up to queries across the data set. And you can do that for all different types of technical services within a data space. So you can see that that's a very technical perspective on maturity of data services for data spaces. So that's one aspect to consider for this. The other aspect is then looking at that organizational view, looking at, okay, so we have the technology and we can build these maturity models to help us understand different types of technology that are needed for data spaces. But what about everything else? What about the organizations? What about the people? What about the ecosystem? What about the collaborations that are needed to be put in place? And this has very much been the mission of BDVA over the last number of years, is to start looking at that broader perspective of data spaces and the different types of pillars that we actually need to ensure that we have a successfully running data space. And this is one of the earlier white papers that we had that basically looked at what were the challenges that we had in European governed data sharing spaces. And one of the key kind of outputs of that white paper was our data sharing wheel here, where we identify these 7 different pillars. So you have data governance, you've got people, you've got organizations, technology, and the data itself. At the core of everything is trust between individuals, trust in the data, and the way that we extract value is by ensuring that we have all of these different pillars appropriately contributing to the data space. So within BDVA, we've been looking at this wheel and understanding, well, how can we use this wheel to help us understand the maturity of different data spaces. So we've been developing our maturity model for data spaces, MM4DS. We've kind of grounded this to help people understand, well, what do we mean by our maturity model, and specifically now when we start talking about capabilities, what do we mean by a capability? Well, we're using the definition here from Helfat and Plethora, which is the term capability refers to the ability of an organization to perform a coordinated set of actions to achieve a particular result. So it's very much about the organization, how it's set up, what are the processes that it has in place to be able to perform these actions, to be able to achieve the desired results that we have. In the context of a data space, we see that a data space capability goes beyond that technology perspective to encompass other factors such as alignment with the organization's strategy, project planning, developing expertise, the culture, the governance inside the organization. So we're taking that broader perspective as we've seen within the data sharing wheel. The idea being that from an organizational point of view, you look at maturity in terms of the different levels that we have for our processes for running these capabilities. So for each of the capabilities that we'll identify for our maturity model, you have the very basic level 1, which is just effectively ad hoc processes. Our coordination is very, very low. In fact, it's effectively done at the individual level. There's not a lot of thought in the process. You move to level 2. Here you start to have an emerging discipline. You start to see evidence of the start, the embryo of coordinated activities within the organization. Level 3 is about defined. It's about actually, well, we are coordinated to a point, but we're primarily responsive. So we have, we're reactive to situations. We're not necessarily being more adventurous that you would expect in at level 4, which is very much about being proactive, which would be looking for opportunities, looking for ways to ensure that we're maximizing our data space. And then level 5 is very much about those kind of next practices, the advanced kind of operations within an organization. What's important to know is that the goal isn't always to reach level 5 in terms of a maturity model. It's to understand where you are. If you're the kind of organization that's looking at a data space as being something that you want to work with, but it's not going to be the core of what you do, well, then maybe level 3 is sufficient. Maybe it's sufficient enough to be able to react to the opportunities as they're made aware to you. But if a data space is going to be something that's very core to your organization and the value proposition and competitiveness of your organization, well, then you're definitely going to be looking at least trying to achieve level 4, where you're proactive and where you're looking at a data space as being a source of opportunity and recognizing that your organization needs to be actively looking for those opportunities, actively working with it. So what we've done is thinking of these capabilities. We've looked at the different pillars that we have within our data sharing wheel, and we've identified specific capabilities that organizations need to ensure that the organizations themselves are developing the appropriate processes and the appropriate posture to be able to benefit from data spaces. And we'll give a very simple example there of the organization pillar there at the bottom right. What we see there is that the key capabilities there for organizations are the need for strategy and planning, for business alignment, and for performance monitoring. So if you're an organization that's working with a data space, it's important that your strategy, your business alignment, your performance monitoring includes the data space, how your organization is interacting with it, what the strategy is for the organization, and how it will gain advantage or benefit from participating in a data space, or even potentially running a data space as well. Another example might be of the people pillar there, where we identify capabilities around skills and culture, and the capabilities needed for adoption and communication. So for each of these pillars, we've identified these capabilities. And we can very quickly look at them here at a high level. So for organization, strategy and planning, business alignment and performance monitoring. For value, it's very much about sensing and capturing. So are you able to sense those value opportunities that exist within the data space? And if you know they're there, do you have the processes to allow you to be able to capture that business value that's been created there? Are your business processes internally set up to be able to benefit from that? For data, we look at things like life cycle management and the management and stewardship of the actual data assets within the data space. Do you have appropriate processes for that to be able to work with the processes that might exist within the data space? In terms of technology, we're quite high level here because we recognize that the technologies themselves can actually spawn many different maturity models that might look at the maturity of specific services, whether it was security, access control, data catalogs, search and querying, etc. So we have the notion of a high level capability of infrastructure here. And that's very much around the sourcing and operation of the technical infrastructure needed to develop your data space objective. So basically, are you in a position to be able to acquire the appropriate technology to be able to run that technology, to be able to participate in the data space? Support services here is about facilitating the usage and application of your data space within your organization. So even though your organization is participating in a data space, do you have the support services that help your employees, your data scientists, your data engineers to be able to work efficiently and effectively with that data space? In terms of people, skills and culture are critical there. Do you have a structured way to be able to promote a data space centric culture within your organization? For adoption and communication, have you appropriate capabilities in place so that everyone in the organization understands what the data space is, how your organization is participating in it, how it hopes to generate value from it. Then in terms of governance, you have the things that you would expect. There are things like policy, compliance, and accountability, ensuring that your processes that you have processes in place to make sure that you're fully compliant with all of the regulatory and policy needs that are in place. And then finally, trust, the level of assurance that you can provide to your data owners, whether they're organizations that you're working with, individuals within your organization. Have you got the appropriate level of assurance in place so that they're comfortable for their data to be used within the data space? So those are the capabilities that we believe it's important for organizations to develop. And what we need to do then is to basically, for each of those capabilities, to define what we call the maturity levels, those levels from 1 to 5 of what's an ad hoc version of that process to what's an advanced version of that process. And this here is a very simple example of that kind of maturity curve at a high level here. So in low maturity, what you're looking at are, yes, we have our data space processes in place, but they're uncoordinated. We've isolated projects. We have low data space skills within our employees. Our data space effort is primarily focused on key individuals, potentially single points of failure. We react to the situation as it unfolds. We have vague metrics. We're primarily internally focused. We have low levels of resourcing in our data space activities. So these are all signals of low maturity within an organization interacting with a data space. On the other side, for high maturity, what you're looking at is having coordinated data space activities across the organization. You have high data space expertise across all of the organizations. You have wide coverage. It's not about any individuals, but rather it's the team that have it. You're proactive about your engagement within a data space. You're looking for opportunities. Your processes are proactive in their nature. You have meaningful metrics that are meaningful to employees, to business, to your stakeholders, and also to your partners within the extended organization as well. You have appropriate resourcing. You've got comprehensive understanding of the data space and your organization's mission in it across the organization. So what we do is we basically take our capabilities that we've identified, and now we're basically identifying those maturity levels, and we have a first draft of those in place. And basically the notion then is that we'll end up, as we've seen before, with basically a large matrix that identifies the specific activities and processes that you expect at each level from 1 to 5 for each of those capabilities that we've talked about before. Once we have that in place, and we have a draft of it in place, I'll talk about it in a minute, what we then do is we start moving to using this maturity model to help us assess the level of maturity of different organizations. The assessment process is relatively straightforward. What we do is we try to define the scope and goal of the data space for an organization so that they understand what they want to do. We then run a survey to help the organization understand what's their current level of data space capability maturity, And then we can also ask them, what do they want to be their desired level as well? So you can identify a gap analysis from where the organization is today to where they want to be tomorrow. By looking at that gap analysis, then you can develop a plan to develop the capabilities which the organization has identified as being important, and then you can assess and manage that over time. So that's a classic way of using a maturity model to help you develop your capabilities and to help work with your organization. To give an example, this is a fictitious example, but basically it gives you an idea of how we can use our maturity model with all of these different capabilities that we've identified, and then basically benchmarking maybe different organizations that are collaborating together within a data space. So you've got these 5 different organizations, they're working together in a data space, and this helps the organizations understand, well, what capabilities am I doing well in, what capabilities are potentially other organizations doing better than me, and can I potentially use that as a learning opportunity, or can I collaborate with them to be able to improve our capabilities as well. So it's a tool that can be used in many different ways. As I said before, and as Tomo said before, it can be very much about the ecosystem as well, looking at the organization, but then looking at the collective ecosystem and all the organizations together to see, well, what's the ecosystem level maturity based on the individual organizations. An early draft of this work actually is captured in a chapter by myself and Tomo. It's coming out in our data spaces book from our big data value public-private partnerships. This is data spaces design, deployment in future directions. And we hope that book to be available as open access in the July-August timeframe. So a couple of months' time, you can actually see that first draft of that maturity model. And we're planning now to actually start doing some benchmarking of some different data spaces over the next couple of months. So that's it for me, Tomo. I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Very thorough work with this one, and I think we can. There is also a question. We can take one question from the chat. So the question goes like, would this maturity model equally work for companies that are mainly data donors or to the data space than those ones more startup kind connected to the data space for the creation of the new AI services?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, and that's exactly what we were looking for when we looked at the initial design for that maturity model. It's about an organization that wants to participate in the data space. It's not for an organization that actually wants to run the data space, or an organization that's maybe trying to establish or start it up. Or rather, I'm a company today. I see these data spaces. How do I want to interact with them? What kind of capabilities will I need to develop to be able to participate in them? So it's very much focusing on the user, on the participation side, as opposed to the infrastructure provider or the data space provider. And that's allowed us to be able to explore, which are actually quite common challenges that you have in any data-driven organization around the types of capabilities that you need to develop. They're much broader than just the technical infrastructure that's required.
All right, very, very good. Thank you very much, Ed, and be coming back with you later on. And I think we are going forward then with Vincent Keunen on the health data platform, and that's the Andaman 7. Just I will promise to show the slide, so I will do that in a second. Just a second. So
you too, Mo.
Hi, Vincent. And now I will share the screen. So. All right.
Yes, I see it. So I hope everybody sees it. Well, thank you for having me in this conversation. I'm going to talk a bit about a special aspect of data, maybe, which is health data. You know that personal identifying data is already somehow critical, but when it goes to health data, it's even more critical. So in that sense, we might need to think about other ways to manage data, that special kind of data. So quickly, yes, you can go to the next slide, and I will quickly present what we are doing. So we are doing a project which is serving both patients on the left side. So that's the social part of our project. And what we're trying to do there is to help patients have access to their health data, because usually you have one family doctor, you might have been treated in one or more hospitals and clinics, and then there's some labs that are doing data processing analysis for you. So your data is usually scattered all over the place as a patient, and that's a problem, especially when you have a condition or chronic condition, or you need to do something and you need your data because you need to move it over from one doctor to the other. So that's the left side of the slide. There are other problems, more global problems. The care stakeholders are really moving now in what is called continuity of care. So it's not only being cured in the hospital, but it's a combination of hospital, family doctor, maybe nurses at home. Many chemos now can be, if you have cancer, many chemos can be at home. So continuity of care is becoming something important and also possible thanks to mobile technologies and so on. And then if we talk about a third sector, which is the research, medical research, so pharma companies, biotechs, medical device manufacturers, all of these institutions, companies that are trying to find new treatments, these organizations need a lot of data too. So these three are the main targets for our project, and we are trying to help them in various ways. So next slide. So what we built is a combination of several tools. One is a personal mobile tool, I should say. It's called a personal health record. So it's a way for you as a patient to store all of your health data on your smartphone and nowhere in the cloud. So I realize that this is a bit counterintuitive compared to data spaces and cloud approaches and so on. But for health data, I think there are lots of benefits in doing this, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So the one part of the solution is a personal health record, allowing the patients to connect to their hospitals, their labs, and all of the data sources, I would say, and collect a copy of that data locally on their smartphone. Of course, we have backup mechanisms and things like that, but the basic idea is that there is no data in the cloud, there is no centralized data by default. And then we have a platform to exchange data between stakeholders. Yeah, next slide. Very quickly, what it looks like for the patient is this, a number of sections where you can store your allergy data, drug data, conditions, and basically everything that you could find in a lab or in the hospital. We can store it locally on your phone, including images, including documents. And you can see on the right side that you can store your own data, but also the data from your close ones, like your children or your parents, if you need to take care of them, right? So that's the patient side. Next slide. Once the patients have their data, then they can be part of, for example, clinical trials. So that's the research part. On the right side, you see two questionnaires that are created by some kind of research organization. And if the patients consent to be part of a trial, then they receive, first they sign a consent form, electronic consent and so on. And then they receive electronic questionnaires like the ones you see here. And to those questionnaires can be joined some parts of their health records. So you don't have to share everything, of course, and you have to decide what you share and agree and consent before. But along the questionnaires, you can contribute some of your data for research purposes. Next slide. So the goal here is to try to solve or to help with the three targets that I was mentioning earlier. So yeah, now you understand that for patients connecting to the various sources of data and storing a copy locally on the phone is basically solving their problem, because now they have access to all of their health data. For research, you also saw that we have a number of questionnaires and ways to share data with the consent mechanism and all of that allows to have part of that data being shared with research. And in this case, of course, data will be anonymized. So we provide some tools that collect the data that will receive, if you want, the data from the patients after they consent. and that data will be anonymized and put in some kind of formats that the research institutions can use. And for the third target, which is the healthcare providers, so hospitals and doctors, in this case, of course, the data needs to be identified because they need to know which patients they are talking to and have the real identity. So the same platform in this case can be used for various needs, more or less anonymized, more or less identified. Next slide. So as I said earlier, the health data is a bit specific because there is an intrinsic conflict of interest, right? As an individual, you really don't want your health data to be out in the public, right? And you have a right to privacy. It's not only a right, but it's a real need, right? And patients need to be want to be in control of the health data. And also, there are a number of dangers if you don't have privacy, right? So let's not talk about political problems and dictatorships and things like that, which is a risk. But even in other types of political systems, there are insurance risks. Normally, an insurance is a way for a number of individuals to contribute a small amount of money and then help the ones that have big needs because they are in serious problems. So that's the basic principles of insurance. And if you deviate from that and have people pay more because they have more serious conditions, then you lose a little bit the benefits of that. So insurance should stay where they should keep their spirit, I should say. Employers are also difficult because if as an employer, you might have a tendency to not recruit some people because they have some conditions, right? And so there is also a number of social problems there. And also reputation problems. Clearly, people that are out in the public, usually they want to have a lot of privacy on their personal or health issues. So privacy is important for individuals. But clearly, you understand that if we can have the data of many people and being able to analyze that data will help with the research. So the common good is a bit different from the individual needs. And that's where the conflict of interest is. So that's why we need to find ways to both protect the privacy of patients, but also find ways to share data after patients' consent and to also make sure that the data does not allow to go back to the individual that shared the data initially. So anonymization techniques and pseudonymization techniques are very important. Next slide. So a quick note on anonymization. So is that a solution? Well, yes, partly. It really allows to remove identifying parts of the information, but there is also a problem to full anonymization, because usually as a researcher in the medical field, you need to know that this data is about the same person, right? For example, I need to do research on prostate cancer. Clearly, I want to have males, right, in my cohort. So I want to have some identifying elements. There's also age groups that are important, or ethnic groups, because some conditions are more common in some ethnic groups than others. So it's not always good to have full anonymization and to have zero ID on the origin of the data regarding the people that share the data. So there is some kind of pseudonymization. So that is needed in a way, as a way to improve research and the insights that the data analysis can provide. Also, for long-term studies, it's clear that you want to follow sometimes a given individual through their way of behaving, through the evolution of some conditions. And for these reasons, there is, even if you don't want to know who that person is, you need to know that it's the same person. And you need to follow that person. So that pseudonymization needs there also. And of course, as has been shown in the press regularly, there are very smart techniques that allow, for example, the combination of anonymized data with your credit card consumption and where you've been, your location data, and not that much of that data actually can be used to re-identify you as a person. So there are those risks also that we have to be careful about. Next slide. So for me, there is no perfect solution, and solution is not only technical. I believe really that we need a strong legal framework. Like GDPR is a good step in the right direction, and we might need to go further some for in the coming years. But I think the legal framework is absolutely necessary because that means that at least if some companies or institutions abuse the data of patients or abuse patients, then we have a legal framework to take them accountable for what they did, right? And so a serious company that is on the market, I think there is a big risk for them to go against the legal framework. So I think the legal framework is a very important piece of the solution. I think we need to have also the individual being part of the decisions, right? Ed showed in his presentation just before me how trust was central for many aspects. I completely agree with this, and one ways to have trust is to give patients here, but citizen in a more general sense, what they want, right? And usually what they want is first to be asked. So they want to give their consent first, and they want to know why they will share the data, who they will share the data with, and always be able to remove their consent in case they realize that there is some kind of abuse. Then they should be able to remove their data. So patient consent and removal of consent, like is already in the GDPR, it's a good part of the GDPR too, are important. The right to be forgotten is also important, and sometimes it's for many people maybe it's not clear. But first, everybody is allowed to do errors, right? When you're young, you do sometimes things that you're not proud of later, but you can improve. So there's a need to be forgotten there for your reputation level, but also for other things. Like if you have had cancer, you wouldn't believe how hard it is for cancer patients to find insurance after their sickness, sometimes to find jobs, right? And there's all kind of inequalities that arise after a cancer. So there are people in Europe, for example, fighting for the right to be forgotten, and it's improving. So now there's, I don't know exactly, but maybe a dozen countries that agree that after that number of years, well, it might be 5 or 10 years after you have had cancer, for example, you don't have to say that you have had cancer. You can hide this information, and that is completely legal. So that gives you a bit more balance and rights to get insurance and to get a job. And finally, I think also that a combination of decentralized and centralized approaches are necessary in the health sector, at least, because as I mentioned earlier, the conflicts of interest and all of these elements that are a bit specific to the healthcare sector. I think that for this specific sector, at least a combination of decentralized and centralized approaches might be the best one. Next slide. Yeah, so quickly, I hope I'm not too high on my time. For me, Andaman, what we're trying to do here is an example of a distributed health record. It's distributed by default, right? Which means that everybody has their data on their smartphone, as I said, and we can decide as a patient to share all or some of our data to another peer that will be maybe centralizing some of that data. So what we have is multiple copies of data at the edge, so at the edge of the network, so not in the central node. Currently, we allow input by a number of stakeholders, patients, doctors, but also nurses and other professionals, also devices, hospitals, labs. All of these can contribute to the data, and it's only centralized on the patient's device. So as I said, we can have identified or anonymized or pseudonymized formats. And then we also provide a number of mechanisms to consent the data, to normalize the data, which is also a huge challenge in health, and to aggregate the data. So with that, this becomes a platform that can be used to build large data sets, data lakes, health data spaces, and big data, and all those large amounts of data that are needed for the new techniques in AI and machine learning. Next slide. Yes, more. That's it. That's it. So this is my contribution for health data, and I'm open to answer some questions if you have on this specific part of the data spectrum.
Okay, thank you so much. And stop sharing now and back to this. Screen here. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Vincent. Interesting presentation. I was just thinking there's so many things, and you are running a company, it's SME, as I understood, and just thinking,
Yes.
while you remember the image I showed in the beginning about the convergence and experimentation, and obviously there are many different kinds of approaches to go, and you are going to business with the sort of like data sharing and data eventually to data spaces. Now, one big question for SMEs has been, I recall, is that this regulation that is coming, especially in health, it has been very like powerful, like framing the whole business. So how do you see that? Well, you were asking for new regulation, so
yeah.
How do you think SMEs and in your case, especially now, can adapt to that? What do you have to take into account?
Yeah. So yeah, regulations are important. That's very clear, right? For everybody, big and small, right? And we have to protect the citizen, we have to protect the patients, right? But at the same time, those regulations should take into account the needs of aggregating data for research and so on, like I explained earlier, right? So that's a very clear thing. Now, the GDPR, as a European person, when GDPR came out, I said, "Oosh, that's going to be difficult for Europeans to have big aggregations of data, right? To do research, while Americans have less of a concern by using and even sometimes abusing data." And other countries like China also have different types of regulations, right? So I thought that it would be a very big problem for us. I still think that it's a big challenge, but as we can see now, what the Europeans have done is something that apparently a lot of people want, right? There's been a California Privacy Act in the US, which is going in the direction of GDPR. It's not as strict as our GDPR, but it's going in that direction. And so, and on the East Coast, there's a few states also in the US that have passed new privacy acts and new regulations. So I think that citizens and patients are getting tired a bit of their data being used and sometimes abused without their knowledge. So there's a maturity there, another type of maturity than Ed was talking about, the maturity of the individuals understanding the importance of their data and why their data could be used, like also the Ed Snowden and all those whistleblowers, right, where many people initially say, well, I don't have anything to hide, why should I be concerned? And then they realize that it's important, right? That privacy is really important for everybody. So I think that's always a challenge and a difficult balance to reach. But in our case, if you look at the regulations, they always are applied to institutions or companies that are collecting other people's data, other citizens' data. And there are a lot of constraints, right? And at the same time, those regulations give more and more power to individuals, right? Return data to patients, have citizens being in control of their data. GDPR is all about that also, right? So by going through patients like we are trying to do within Andaman 7, I think we are aligning to the regulations instead of going against the regulations somehow. So I hope that the regulations will help us more than slow us down, because we're going through patients and through citizens.
Yeah, that's, thank you very much. It's a sort of like ongoing effort all the time with the regulation and trying to find the ways for the company that what can be done. And you could say that all right, there's not so much maturity because it's running all the time, even though you have a product and you have yes,
you're right.
Yeah, sort of like in that sense. All right, thank you very much, Vincent. I think we will have to continue and thank you very much, and we will find the next speaker, who is Marko Turpeinen, and Marko, you are there. I just switch my screens and all right. Marko will be talking about agriculture data spaces and data space and agri-food data spaces. So please go on. So.
Well, thank you, Tuomo. I hope you can see my slides and hear me well. So Marko Turpeinen is my name. I'm the CEO of a Finnish company called 1001 Lakes. And well, the name is a bit of a pun on if we have many data lakes, 1001 data lakes, so then we have a data space. And one of the things that we then try to do is, well, what are the building blocks? What are the mechanisms? What are the ways that the organizations can be more capable in actually implementing these data ecosystems? So that's where we build our business. But today I'm going to talk about agri-food, and let me start by giving you the larger picture. In EU, there is a EU-wide strategy called Farm to Fork, and so really we should look into the entire food system from the farmers and also things beyond the farmers, before farmers, in a way, fertilizers and things like that, all the way to retail and circulation of materials from food consumption. So the entire value chain or value network, the whole system should be looked into. And that's a really, really broad and complex task. And then when we kind of start with data spaces, so one question is, well, where do we start? And I will come to that a little bit later, but currently there are things going on the retail side, but then there are also many things going on the agricultural production side. And then the question is, well, are these two meeting? The examples that I have here, though, are from Finland, and so, for example, you have these very, very accurate ways of measuring individual products, in this case chicken products, carbon footprint at the level of that particular farm, that particular batch. So you get an exact number that so and so many grams of CO2. And then on the other hand, also on the consumer side, so you have more and more this need to be able to follow what are my consumption patterns, how could I change my consumption patterns to be more environmentally friendly. So then you are providing tools like the one on the right hand side, and then maybe even having a way to connect to those individual producers and see more clearly the transparency, track back to the original producer of the food. So these are just kind of a couple of examples of what's actually going on in the business right now that has a lot to do with data, getting the data moving, getting the data interoperable, and then being able to build these services on top. On the other hand, when you look at the world of agricultural data, farm data, so this is the farmer's view on the world, and I'm taking this from a Belgian example, and the story is that it's very fragmented, it's very complex. If I'm a farmer, I need to be interacting with tens and tens of different service providers, crop monitoring services, different kind of platforms that allow me to optimize my processes, traceability, as I mentioned before, not only this kind of a consumer traceability, but there are other kinds of traceability needs. And then there are kind of public authorities that need to access the data from the farms. And then there are the agricultural machinery providers. And you can imagine that then if you need to agree one-on-one on each and every one of these, counterpoints, that's a complex process for a single farmer. And the other thing is that a farmer doesn't really have a really good, negotiation power. If I'm John Deere and the biggest agricultural machinery provider in the world versus a farmer, so there's kind of a inherent misbalance in a way in kind of negotiating that what's happening with the data that, for example, my farming machinery can collect. And one more thing, because we've talked a lot about privacy in the previous one. So there's also an interesting kind of a specific thing about agriculture and farm production is that farmers are often small units, family farms. And then this sort of notion that what's personal data and what can you deduct from the data that's actually collected from the farm, is a really interesting shade of gray. So you might say that almost all of the farm data can actually be sort of used to, for example, analyze how well economically the farm is producing, therefore how well the family is doing, therefore it's actually personal data. So sort of this also shows that this sort of dichotomy of what's personal data and what's industrial data somehow is not clear. And in this one, it's very important to be able to control also the flow of data, also from the point of view of protecting the privacy of the farmers. Well, some examples of the existing systems that are out there already, because we're talking about the maturity. So we're not starting from scratch with, sharing of data, and there are several attempts, especially in Europe, to already do this. And some are, already in the market, quite mature, but then whether they actually are meeting some of the larger needs and larger kind of maturity levels that Ed was talking earlier, that's the question. But let me start by AgriRoute a bit, which has started from Germany. There are other members already beyond Germany, but clearly is quite German-centric as an initiative. And this is about farm data, collecting especially the data from the machinery and being able to route the data from machinery to the applications that are using them. Farm Management Information System, FMIS, is a clear example of large set of different applications that are typically used to optimize and manage the farm production. So you can use AgriRoute and its APIs to actually connect multiple different systems and kind of map the data. On the other hand, especially technically, so this is quite centralized platform type of a system run by a company, and it doesn't quite have this decentralized nature that we might be after. And then it's focusing on certain type of data, so very much this farm data, machinery data. Another example, which is maybe more mature in terms of thinking of expansion and different set of use cases, and then also decentralization, is Just Connect from Belgium. ILVO, which is a national or an organization in Belgium that is representing the farmers, but also kind of has a strong links to the Belgian government, is behind this platform, and it has been used, for example, in the dairy production, as you can see of the pictures, but there are also other use cases, and is one of the kind of early embryonic versions of a data space where it's meant to be expandable, it's meant to be quite let's say taking into account the complexity of various types of participants and various types of data, maybe in a more broader sense than the example of AgriRoute. So clearly meets this mapping of where we are with maturity, maybe a little bit at a higher level than the agriculture. But on the other hand, on the business side and how much AgriRoute is used in business, so there, if you use that criteria, so that's actually being used on a daily basis a fair bit by the agricultural producers. Couple of other examples. So Ag Data Hub from France, there was a large project called API Agro, and this is a kind of extension of that. And again, now here, many different use cases, starting from getting the data from the farms, but also the food production companies are involved. The public sector needs are involved, the educational and research entities and needs of researchers are taken into account. So this is very much, you know, closer to this idea of, you know, let's take the entire food system and having both public and private actors kind of benefiting from the data sharing. So this has been ongoing for about 10 years in France, and I would say is one of the more mature initiatives. On the other hand, then how kind of, you know, everyday practices in France have been, you know, able to actually start using this, and how deep it is in kind of everyday, you know, practices in general. So I think there is still some way to go, but at least, you know, in terms of the concept and then how it has been stepwise built. So there's lots of promising stuff happening around Ag Data Hub. And then the fourth example I'm bringing actually from Finland, and I've been involved myself in this Agri-Food Data Space Finland effort, which again, the idea is that we connect these different platforms, we connect the service providers, we connect the different applications, but also make it so that it can be maybe linked to another industry, perhaps financial and insurance would be another example that we need to be able to, you know, build bridges across industries. And then from very early on, so the idea here has been that whatever we are building, we want to build that on top of the emerging European standards like IDS, like GAIA-X. GS1 is a very, very strong player in the sector because they have developed the system for product codes, and you know, metadata wise is one of the key players in agriculture. So anyway, that's a quick run through of some examples that are out there, which are clearly data spaces, but in different levels of maturity, and some quite early, I would say, still in the process of getting to very large scale use in the business. Another thing that I wanted to mention, because I think this is a really a good practice, one of the best practices in any industry that I've seen so far, is that already in 2018-19 there was this work led by these large entities in Europe, for example, Copa Cogeca and CIMA, but also representing very, very broadly the industry on how to create this code of conduct that would actually look into fairness and would look into the practices of data sharing, and what kind of implications would that have at the contractual level. I won't go into details, but I just recommend this as reading, because it actually is a very nicely written paper on what's involved and how this industry has started to look into those broader questions and how to solve them concretely. And it has very strong backing of the entire industry, as said. But then you can also kind of go a little bit from other directions to how do we agree on things, how do we build this. Just wanted to mention here that I've been myself quite a bit involved in IDSA, International Data Space Association, where one of the things that we are doing in IDSA is to have this rule book approach that we kind of help and guide different entities, different organizations to build their systems on a solid basis, first of all, but then also agree on the rules, the policies, the ways the data can and cannot be used within each data space instance as they are growing. And this is also linked to some of the work that we've done in Finland in a project that has been organized by the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra. So this is what's called called Fair Data Economy Rulebook. And the idea with the rulebook is that whenever you have a data sharing network, whenever you have this sort of a, part of the data economy, so you would like to agree on the rules beyond the let's say generic regulation, and how to do that, and how to look into these different aspects of business and legal and ethical and technical and so forth, security. So this tool helps you to check whether you agree or not agree on certain things, and then how to turn those into your contractual framework, how to actually kind of create the agreements for your data ecosystem. So that's a tool, and one of the reasons why I'm mentioning it here is that we actually have an ongoing project with the Finnish Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, where we are applying this tool now to the sector of agriculture as we speak. Then finally, I wanted to mention that there was a very good effort by a team of players in this agricultural data space area related to the Digital Europe program. We don't know the results of the call, but this was a couple of months ago. So there was the call opening for preparatory action on this, what's the common European approach for agricultural data spaces. And here our team was looking into this from two different perspectives. So very, very important to have this interoperability between platforms, and looking at, for example, what this DSBA framework where BDVA is involved, but of course Fiverr and GaiaX and IDSA as well. So what is that actually proposing, and how can the agricultural sector be as compliant as possible as it emerges, and the other thing is that, well, what's in the code of conduct, and how can we move the code of conduct further, and how can we be more specific in what does it mean from the point of data spaces. And then so there was this group of participants, Ag Data Hub from France, coordinating, and many of these players, by the way, are involved also in the GaiaX domain working group that's looking at the agricultural side from the implementation and progress of the GaiaX program. So that's also one of the backgrounds for how these different players came together. But again, we don't know yet if we will win this proposal, but just wanted to mention it here that at least our effort is very much targeted towards, let's make these things interoperable. Let's have a plan on how Europe becomes more interconnected in terms of the agricultural data spaces. So just final reflection. So some of the core use cases that we can mention in the area of agriculture, so production efficiency, food safety, traceability, sustainability, and also then public subsidies, and how to follow the right use of public subsidies. Key players: farmers, equipment manufacturers, food processing industry, logistics, wholesale, retail, regulators. So a very broad set of different players. And what can the data space do? Well, it's a trusted infrastructure for data. It's the data usage control is really important in terms of how to make it fair, how to make it transparent, how to make it work. Better traceability of usage of data, better traceability in the production and the entire system. News services from consumers, improved market understanding, and fairer distribution of data value. So that's kind of why do we need, what do we do with the benefits of data spaces? So that's it. Thank you for listening, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Marco. And let me check the chat first. There's no chat questions. Yeah, I was just thinking one thing. My intuition here said that looking at the rule books, and that sort of like helping in the design of data spaces, and you have different kinds of rules and setting. And then I was just also, maybe this is also to Ed as well, that isn't it so that this rulebook is trying to solve these maturity issues a priori, in a sense that that would mean that maybe the maturity probing would be like benefiting of this kind of interaction of these two pieces. How would you see, Marco?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you're completely right that that one of the goals of the rulebook thinking is that to make the parties aware and then actually act on things that, well, in Ed's model, actually help you to move to the next level. And of course, then it's a different thing of, you know, putting things on paper and then actually making them happen. And so you can have good principles and good ideas for practices, but then how far you are actually able to implement? Are you able to monitor? Do the parties actually comply? So that's a whole different set of questions. But I completely agree that, you know, this, you know, maturity thinking and helping also with the process, like the maturity modeling process, but the rulebook process as such as well. So kind of helping the different networks and parties understand where they stand and what needs to be done in terms of being a more mature data space. So I think that is one of the values of the whole process.
All right, thank you very much, Marco, and we'll have to continue now, maybe because of the timing. So just we'll continue the discussion surely in the future, and let's go forward and see the next presentation from Till Lek from SINTEF, and that this talk is about maritime data space. Are you
Thank
there?
you.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Let me just share my screens. I think I need to. Do you see the screen in presentation mode now?
No, this is the.
Okay, let me just see how I can swap this like this. Now it should be fine.
Perfect.
Good. Good morning, everybody. My name is still Christopher Lech, working with SINTEF Digital in Norway. And I am going to talk about a pilot that we implemented in the maritime sector based on the IDSA reference architecture. Very briefly about SINTEF first. With, well, I think a bit more than 2,000 employees. We're one of the larger research organizations in Europe, quite multidisciplinary, and apply, well, or we have quite a range of roles in the whole research and innovation ecosystem. The community that I'm representing, the Smart Data Group at SINTEF, is working on data for AI, digital twins, and data ecosystems, where we bring in our expertise in big data pipelines and workflows, data sharing, data ecosystems, as well as technologies for interoperability, such as semantics and industrial ontologies. And we provide also some expertise in applied AI and analytics. The project that I am going to talk about is the maritime data space, which was implemented between 2018 and until summer last year, with some delays based on the corona pandemic, unsurprisingly. It was funded as an innovation project by the Research Council of Norway, with NAVTOR as project owner, a company providing operation platforms for the maritime sector. We have DNV in the consortium, which is a classification company or classification organization, and also provides risk and asset management. In this context, they provided their Veracity data platform. We had Wilhelmsen, which is a ship management organization, and providing their Neuron platform for onboard data or on vessel data services. So the point of the or the goals of the maritime data space project was, on the one hand side, a feasibility study for data sharing in the maritime sector. while also a pilot implementation of the IDS-A reference architecture, because the needs that we had in the sector are very well aligned with the goals of the International Data Spaces Association, which are about secure data exchange, providing digital sovereignty, so maintaining the ownership of data, that meaning that the data provider keeps control of the use of their data. So in order to see how this model of data sharing can provide new business processes and new business opportunities for NAVTOR, we executed this project in close collaboration with the International Data Spaces Association, which of course has been a big help in getting the project established. Let's go on. Yeah, so this is what the current ecosystem in the maritime data space looks like. So it's based on the reference architecture of the IDS-A and includes the following main components. On the one hand side, on the bottom on the bottom of the screen in green, you see the connectors here illustrated as green boxes. They are responsible for the exchange of data as they execute the complete data sharing process. They provide a metadata to a broker about the technical interface description and the exposed data sources, along with the associated data usage policies. So it's important to know that the data is transferred directly between the connectors of the data provider and the data consumer. So this is according to the decentralized peer-to-peer network concepts. So we have no centralized technical components in the maritime data space that mediates the data between participants. On the left-hand side in pink or in red, I think we have the identity provider offering service to create, manage, and validate the identity information of the participants in the maritime data space. They consist of a certificate authority that manages digital certificates, and all of the connectors use mutual transport layer security to communicate securely in all the business cases that we implemented based on two-way authentication with public key infrastructure certificates. And in addition, all maritime data space participants are assigned a custom domain. So the certificates are then linked to these unique domains, and this forms also the basis of the ecosystem. Finally, we have the broker service provider, which is a centralized role that stores and manages information about participants and data offerings. The activities of the broker service provider mainly focus on receiving and providing metadata, which must be described according to the IDS-A information model. But the broker service provider in the actual data exchange. So after the broker service provider has provided the data consumer with the metadata about a certain data provider, their job is mainly done, and it's not involved in the subsequent exchange process of the data. So this is, in very broad terms, the implemented architecture aligned with the concepts of the IDS. And in the remainder of the presentation, I will talk about the business cases that have been implemented in order to validate the operational and financial feasibility of the MDS concepts. So let's have a look at two of them. The first business case is the dealing with compliance. It's about the MRV business case that is reporting that is about reporting efficiency. So MRV stands for Maritime Reporting and Verification Regime, which is a regulatory requirement for all ships sailing to or from or between European ports. Normally, you need a recognized organization that that gets the data from the shipping companies and would send the data on to the regulation authority, in this case EMSA. So this is mainly done by the DNV in the project. And currently, or before the implementation of the maritime data space, this is a rather cumbersome process involving manual reporting down to the level of email attachments being sent and forth. So through the MDS concept, the relevant data is captured on board by the Neuron Solution Data Bridge and sent to Veracity for verification by DNV as the recognized organization on behalf of EMSA. So the connectors from Neuron Solution and Veracity ensure that the data now seamlessly is being processed from ship to shore, from ship to DNV. The background for this, as a ship manager, Wilhelmsen Ship Management operates a wide range of ship types on behalf of different owners. So different reporting requirements mean also different sensor data, different types of sensor data, and which varies from segment to segment and owner to owner. So this results in that very much data traditionally is being collected manually and reported manually. With the MDS approach, this data can now be collected automatically from multiple sources, both sensor data as also event data, such as, for example, the noon reports from each vessel, and efficiently being processed to DNV, who verifies the data and handles the reporting to EMSA. So in this business case, we see that the MDS concept fits rather perfectly to solve these current challenges in terms of manual reporting and information flow in order to make the regulatory reporting more efficient. Moving on to the second business case, this is about estimated time of arrival data management. So this ETA and speed management is a quite important enabler for both the emission management of the vessels, but also cost savings. So the commercial operator of the vessels under Wilhelmsen Technical Management use this estimated time of arrival data in their day-to-day operations, but with relatively low resolution and frequency traditionally. So through the MDS, NAVTOR now can send data on the same level of accuracy and detail as used in their web-based fleet monitoring system, NAV Fleet as it's called, and they can send it now directly to Wilhelmsen Ship Management, given all the privacy and security requirements that are inherent here. So Wilhelmsen on their side now, as a ship management company, they can add analytics to the data and give the operator access to more real-time and real-life analysis and decision based on that business case. So the data collected by NAVTOR is of much higher quality and has significant higher frequency than traditional event data, such as these noon reports that are issued daily on a daily basis by the vessels. So they allow for a much improved decision support. And through sharing of this data with the commercial operator or the cargo owner, fuel savings and emission reduction can be achieved for the vessel. So in summary, the MDS has established a framework for data sharing that will facilitate NAVTOR's increasing data exchange from vessel to shore and contribute to new services in 3 ways, basically. One is about sharing the vessel information like passage plan data with the customers and partners, making sure that the consistency between data and also the access is provided, being what is displayed in the systems, both on board and on shore. Secondly, they will add new service to the onboard planning station, which is called nav station, like their near real-time monitoring of fuel consumption supported by shore-based analytics, And thirdly, the MDS data sharing will contribute to the fundament for shore-based monitoring of safety and fuel performance in the new fleet monitoring service called NAVFleet, which was launched last autumn. So what's the road ahead for the MDS scenario? We have had a good collaboration with IDSA for a while. We've been members, SINTEF has been members since 2016. Currently, we collaborate in the Horizon 2020 Data for Zero project, which is about zero defect manufacturing. And the concepts within the field of data sharing and exchange scenarios are also put into or built upon in ongoing projects, such as the H2020 CogniTwin project, which is about cognitive digital twins for the process industry, or the Vessel AI project, dealing with an HPC platform for the maritime industry that was launched last year. So we have been for a while in dialogue with Norwegian industry stakeholders about establishing also a Norwegian IDSA hub, where we also want to spread and build upon the results that we've been working on in the MDS project. So this concludes my presentation of this pilot that we had in both data sharing and use of the IDSA reference architecture in the maritime sector. So please feel free to contact either myself or my colleague Doug Utley from SINTEF Ocean if you want to have more information about these activities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Till. I'm giving Tomo a small break, so I'll ask you a couple of questions. So you mentioned digital twins, which is a very exciting way for organizations to try to extract value from data, but also it's a very useful metaphor for communicating with a non-technical audience as well. What are your thoughts then on that collaboration or that synergy between the digital twins metaphor and that infrastructure and data spaces? How do you see them working together in the long term?
I think data sharing and data spaces are a prerequisite for exploiting the full potential of digital twins. Especially if you want to use digital twins for advanced analytics and machine learning. Companies normally have trouble with the sparsity of data, but by sharing data across organizations or along value chains, you will accumulate more data to train better models and to release the full potential of this AI revolution everybody's talking about. Yeah. So I see a symbiosis basically between data spaces and digital twins.
Absolutely. I think it's a great way of capturing the value proposition of the data space, because the data space can power so many different things, but the digital twin really kind of gives that nice metaphor that a business user, a domain expert can understand. I can use that twin in my daily business to solve problems, and the data spaces is always making that twin better, more accurate.
Exactly.
More powerful. And that's fantastic. The other very quick question, you work with a lot of stakeholders as well within this maritime data space, and it seems that it's a great example of where collaboration, in the same way with agriculture, collaboration is really important to make these businesses work. How do you think, what kind of role do you think the data space is playing there in terms of pushing forward digitalization within the maritime sector? Do you think it's a key trend, or is it something that was recognized? Data sharing is something that was recognized already.
Let me put it this way: it starts to get more and more recognized, because the maritime sector is quite an integrated sector. So the key stakeholders know each other very well. I wouldn't call it a closed group, but it's a tight group, to put it that way. And but the trouble is that exchange of information or exchange of data is still being done due to it's also a very traditional sector, if I may say so. So the exchange of data is still largely done in a very traditional way. So as I said, there's lots of emails being sent and forth, and but the sector is starting to recognize the efficiency gains that lie within the concept of data sharing. So I think this concept of data spaces and well, data sharing is the first step, and then establishing data spaces is the next step, will mature more and more in the sector.
Fantastic, great. Thanks for the insights. Wonderful presentation. I'll pass it back to Tomo for our next speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Till, and also Edward. So yes, we will continue, and the final talk is about Kraken, SSI, and solutions to data spaces, and then we have Juan Carlos and Sebastian online, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tomo, for giving us the opportunity to present some results from Kraken project. So, do you see my screen and hear me well?
Yes, we'll just put it to the presentation mode. So.
Okay, so I'm going to put in presentation mode. Yeah.
Very good.
That's it. Okay, thank you. So basically, we are going to present the main results related with this self-sovereign identity and crypto solutions we are developing in Kraken. And my name is Juan Carlos Pérez Baón. I belong to the Blockchain Identity and Privacy Unit in Atos Research and Innovation. And I'm coordinating the Kraken project. My colleague, Sebastian Ramacher from EIT, is working in the crypto solution, and we will have this main overview. Okay, so basically a quick overview of the project is Kraken is an innovation action. We started in December 2019 and we finished in November 2022 in 6 months. And basically the main goal for Kraken is overcoming the different obstacles which are preventing the citizens to share data in a trusted environment. So in this way, Kraken has developed a trusted and secure personal data platform, and we are using state-of-the-art privacy-aware analytics methods. And Kraken is based in 3 main pillars. Is the SSI solution that is providing a user-centric access control to data, and the data owner controls their data at any moment. Crypto tools, the second pillar, for enabling a data analytics as a service platform integrated with the marketplace. And in this case, we are ensuring an end-to-end secure data sharing. And by using different tools such as secure multi-party computation, proxy encryption, functional encryption, or ceremony proof, and some of them Sebastian will give some inputs on that. So, and basically the third pillar is the marketplace that brings both pillars together in an open decentralized exchange system, and they are leveraging blockchain and smart contracts. And what is important, we are developing Kraken solution and following the GDPR regulation and the assessment that the legal department has been, the legal partner has been provided during all the process. So the thing is how Kraken can help to the data space. So according to the European Commission, the data space play a significant role for the European strategy and for data and the digital single market. So this includes sharing personal and sensitive data in a secure way and assuring that the data has a high quality. So the challenge in front of us are the data can flow between the different EU members and also across different sectors. So besides this, need to be assured that the data privacy is protected and follows the GDPR rules, regulation, and also providing clear, practical, and fair rules for accessing the data, and facilitating at the end the data economy. In this sense, several initiatives has been developed during the last years, namely the IDSA, ILSA, GaiaX, or Open Day. So in this context, Kraken provide a solution piloting into pilots, the health and education. And we are contributing to that space by providing tools that we can say support service, as Ed mentioned at the beginning of the presentations, and solution that can preserve the privacy and assure the security and the trustability, the integrity and confidentiality of the data, and even between different data spaces. So other centralized solutions such as self-sovereign identity is allowing a user-centric access control, and the cryptographic tools allows us to secure end-to-end data sharing, and also, as I mentioned before, to assure the authenticity and confidentiality of the data analytics. Besides this, we are providing privacy metrics and usable interfaces, and also ethical and legal framework. Important point that Vincent also highlight in the presentation. I find to provide an economic value and for personal data spaces. So going to focus on the self-sovereign identity solution Kraken is developing or has been developed. The SS solution is based on hyperledger areas and provides a decentralized user-centric approach on personal data sharing. And we are using verified credential in order to, with different levels of assurance for accessing the service. This is provided by the LIM. And also in order to be ready for being aligned with the FCSIF approach that has been provided by the European Commission. We are leveraging the capacities basically related with the trust framework that they provide, and we are trying to use. So basically the solution we propose has different components, and SSI mobile app for managing the credentials and the key material. So a ledger user broker that is serves for integrating the different service providers, in our case the marketplace and the university. And additionally, a backup or synchronization system is integrated with the mobile app. Also, we are including the universal DID resolver solution and the resolution and the trust framework that is involving the DID registry, scam registry, and ISO registry and revocation. So additionally, we are leveraging technologies and solutions developed by the commissions, such as said before, the FCSIF, and try to be aligned with them. So going into a little bit more detail on the different aspects, the use of management of verified credentials. We are using the legal identity manager in order to obtain verified credentials that are derived from the eIDAS authentication process. And additionally, this component also supports the creation of a qualified certificate for digital signature using a verifiable ID. So also we have been developed the Kraken Web Company tool. Is a web-based graphical user interface for manualization and verification of the credential by companies. So regarding the edge tools that we are providing for decentralized identity solution, the creation of the mobile SSI mobile app for managing the credentials and the key material is a graphic user interface for end users in order to interact with the SSI solution, and is allowing the users to use their own mobile device for identifying themselves following this SSI approach. So also the broker, in order to, as mentioned, the facilitate integration with the SSI solution with the service providers. And it means that we are simplifying all the process and protocols performed by this type of solution and that are behind that. So this is an easy solution for the integration. And also an SSI wallet manager is a mechanism for storing the end user information. It means the credentials, the verified credentials, and the key material, and facilitates the use of different devices by the user, by the same user, and also in the case of the device that contains the personal identity information is lost or stolen, the user can recover the information. So regarding the trust framework, this framework supports trustability in the SSI solution, and also facilitates, as mentioned, the compatibility with EPSIF and EPSIF. And they are different trusted registries that we have been developing and mentioned before. And finally, we created a public DID infrastructure that is built by different services that in order to support the access to the different data layer technologies used in Kraken. And these are a set of components that are supporting the management of public DID by the consortium. And we are providing the associated services for creating, generating, and also publishing, and then using the public DIDs in the different use cases and scenarios we are developing. And we also include external distributed layer technology as EPSIF. So that's all from this part of self-sovereign identity. And now Sebastian will present some aspects of the crypto tools that we are developing. So Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Perfect. So I'm quickly changing to my slides.
Okay.
So should be able to see them now.
Yeah. So, sure.
Perfect. So thanks. Okay. Yeah, my name is Sebastian Ramacher. I'm from ERT, the Austrian Institute of Technology, and I'm working on the cryptographic aspects of Kraken. And today I'll give an outlook of two technologies and how they could be integrated in a data marketplace to provide privacy guarantees and also authenticity guarantees, which are very interesting features for such a data marketplace. So we start from a scenario where we have, for example, multiple data producers that can produce any kind of data. Today we've already seen from health data to agricultural data and so on. And the main idea of the Kraken marketplace is here to offer kind of the possibility to sell data or give access to the data from producers to consumers. This raises multiple questions on the marketplace side. So first of all, the marketplace doesn't really want to deal with the data themselves. Otherwise, the marketplace would have to handle all the confidentiality guarantees and also deal with much more of the GDPR. So the idea is that the marketplace really is just a way to connect the consumers and producers. Yes, from the data side. And here we have two questions that we want to look at. So first of all, there's the more or less simple case, right? Data producers could directly transfer the data to the data consumer, which is often not something that you want because it could include sensitive data. So, but we would still like to give data consumers the possibility to compute on this data. Think of a shared statistic over many consumers, for example. If we go back to the health scenario, that you run a study over a certain population set. So for this feature, we want, of course, privacy and confidentiality guarantees, which means that, first of all, the marketplace doesn't learn anything, and the consumer only learns really the data that they are supposed to learn, which if you run an analysis of some data set, it's only the result of this analysis and nothing else. So this is interesting from the perspective of the producer, but also from the perspective of the marketplace. For the perspective of the consumer, one guarantee that is really important is authenticity. So there needs to be some assurance that the data that has been transformed is authentic, that if there's computation performed on this data, this computation has been done correctly. So otherwise, a consumer can't be sure that he really gets or they really get what they've asked for. And from the cryptographic side of view, there are two interesting technologies to support such a scenario. The first one is secure multi-party computation. Here, the idea is that we don't share the data as it is, but the data is distributed among different computation nodes in such a way that this data can only be recovered if all computation nodes are compromised. So from an attacker point of view. So a single node doesn't have any knowledge of the actual data. So to them, the input data looks completely random and contains no information. But they support a protocol where they can jointly compute functions on data and then send this result of the computation to the consumer. Within these protocols that they run, they also don't learn anything of the information that the other nodes contain, and the only real information that is then published is the data sent to the consumer. So this is a tool that we can leverage to run computations also, for example, in a cloud environment, but it also supports a setting where, for example, in an eHealth context, where these computation nodes are, for example, located at different hospitals, so that hospitals cooperating on a wider scale study can do that safely and securely without their data leaving their premises. The second, so with this, we can already start looking at marketplace architecture. So what Kraken envisions for the data marketplace is a setting where we have a data producer that announces to the marketplace that they have some data available, and the users then distribute the data in an encrypted form and secret shared form to the computation nodes. And when a data consumer then wants to access this data, they can ask the marketplace, please trigger the computation, and the computation nodes will perform this computation and send it to the consumer. So here we first of all have privacy guarantees. Then from a user perspective, it's also important that they might want to restrict the kinds of computations that are performed on their data. Think especially also on the GDPR, every time when you share data, it's always for a specific purpose, and this purpose needs to be enforced also in the marketplace architecture. So here we give the users the power to define access policies that are then enforced also by the marketplace and the computation nodes before any computation is performed or sent to the consumer. And then, of course, there's this questions: how can the consumer check that this is the result of the computation is authentic? And here we come to the second interesting cryptographic technology, which are zero-knowledge proofs. They are a very general-purpose tool to prove statements on certain piece of information. The interesting thing is that I can claim statements without revealing my secrets. So I could claim that I know a solution to the Rubik cube without revealing it, and everybody could publicly verify that I know this solution. More interestingly, this of course also works for any secret information that you have. As an extension of that, it can also be used to ensure that computations are done correctly, because the MPC nodes can then prove that they've taken the input data, performed the computation correctly, and this is the result they got, and there is a link between their inputs and their outputs. So we add as an additional step here an authenticity link from the data producer to the consumer, where the data producers initially sign the data, so we know from whom the data is coming, and we can verify that. The MPC nodes verify this signature and can then prove that they know a signature on the data without revealing any information on the original data except the computed result. And they send this proof then to the consumer, and the consumer can verify that everything has been done correctly. So we have all the three features. Now the question is, this is all nice, how practical is that? So for the MPC part, this can be done depending on the setting and statistics you want to do very efficiently, and we've demonstrated that also in Kraken with interesting data sets. We have also the limited use, which is done via signatures. This is also can be done very efficiently. And then we have the authenticity. This is something that is some bottleneck, but this is a very active area of research currently, how to make this really efficient. And we have also been working on in Kraken to combine the MPC part with the zero knowledge part to get efficient architecture overall. And with that, I'm at the end of what Kraken is doing in the space, and I want to thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos and Sebastian, for this presentation and on this technology. So I think I have, well, this is not fair because there's not so much time, but just thinking about this, that when you look at these technologies, so how do you think that that they would converge eventually with the data space's evolution? Just in a couple of words or sentences on this. So how do you see?
Yeah, so I think there is currently a very active line of research, but it's also moving more towards industry. We've seen very big startups especially in Europe, in the area of MPC specifically, where work is performed to get this really practical, and it's especially interesting if you do any kind of or want to perform any kind of computation and on the data, and I think that we will see interesting solutions in the next couple of years which make this practical.
Yes. we will be looking forward to that. Thank you very much. And there was also one question in the chat that about the definitions of the data spaces. I think this is something that we need to look up more into in the future. That what do we mean by data spaces, and what are data platforms? Because there are so many visions as there are many people, and of course there are some now some fixed definitions that we could delve into, but I think that work is going to happen in the future in different organizations, and especially I think that they will build this kind of effort, and I look forward to cooperation on this within the data spaces business alliance, and if there is and to see this kind of discussion going and work forward with the data spaces and also the maturity of data spaces. So thank you so much for the active commenting in the chat, and for the audience, and thanks for having or being with us here, and big thanks also and the virtual applause also to the people who have been doing great work and participating, and then I would say that the work continues in the future, and we'll be seeing. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Tomo.
All right, I think we are out of the loop. Is that right, Sina?